welcome everybody to another MandoLessons live. It looks like we got tons of people here today. That is awesome. We got Yellow Rose Farm. Ted, great to see you. California, Evanston, Illinois, Little Falls, Michigan, Beijing, Tucson, Albany, Oregon, Michigan, Minnesota. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining in. Lots of familiar faces here and some new ones too. Great to have you all here. That was a tune called Waterbound. I actually just put out a lesson on it a couple weeks ago. A great old-time tune in the key of A. One of my favorites, a great one to really work on some of that double stop stuff. And not too bad of a sort of skeletal melody, so you can get it under your fingers and then start working through it. It's got some words too, kind of repetitive. Waterbound and I can't get home. Waterbound and I can't get home. Waterbound and I can't get home. Down in North Carolina. And maybe have to stay till morning. There's a couple different versions. But called Waterbound. Somebody said that it was a Civil War song. I'm unfamiliar with that, but that's good to know. There's always a story behind every tune, it seems like. All right, hello from Barcelona and another North Carolina. Great. All right, well, if you haven't been here before, welcome. These happen every Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And it's a great place to ask questions if you got any, or make some requests. I only do public domain stuff, so no copyrighted material. But if I know it, I'll try to play it for you. If you got questions about technique or mandolins or music in general, throw it out there. I love to hear what people are working on. And I'll do my best to keep up with the chat, but sometimes it gets away from me. And if I keep missing your question, by all means, just post it again, and I'll try to get to it. Great. Well, that was a little bit of an old-time tune. All right, let's see. Maybe I'll... Great question from Yellow Rose Farm. How do you play B7, B dominant 7? I assume you mean B like a B chord. 7. If you mean flat 7, that's kind of a more vague question, but running off the assumption that you mean a B7, I'll give you a couple here. A great B, if you watch my lesson, Learn to Play Every Major and Minor Chord, you might have this shape under your fingers. It's 4, 4, 6, 7. A nice B major chord. And then to make it a dominant 7 chord, or a B7, you're just going to take that 7th fret on the E string and make it a 5th fret, which is an A. You got to swap your fingers around. So now you've got pointer finger kind of barring on 4, 4, and then ring finger on 6, and your middle finger on the 5th fret. That's a nice B7. Another one that's a little more condensed is down here at the 2nd fret. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G string. Pointer finger on the 1st fret of the D string. And your ring finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. So you can hear they're kind of similar. So if you were going to go from a B7 to an E, it might sound like this. Or down here. Great question. Ooh, good question from Recovering Bassist. Can I play a song in B for you? Sure, I'll try to do something. I'm not great because I haven't been playing bluegrass for a bunch of years. I started out playing bluegrass, but now pretty much, at least on my own time, just play fiddle tunes. So I don't get that much of an opportunity to play in B, so my key of B chops aren't what they used to be. But I'll try to do a little bit of something in B and maybe throw in a simple little break. See what I can do for you here. I'll use like 9-pound hammer. See, I'm also not great at singing in B. It's a little high for me. This 9-pound hammer, it's a little too heavy for my side, for my side. Roll on, buddy, roll a coal. How can I roll when the wheels won't go? It's a long way to Hazard, it's a long way to Harlem, just to get a little brew, just to get a little brew. So roll on, buddy, take a load of coal. How can I roll when the wheels won't go? So yeah, I got a little lost there, right? I just gotta find my right starting point there. That's better. I was in the wrong spot. So just to get roll on, buddy, roll a coal. How can I roll when the wheels don't go? So that's a little bit of a 9-pound hammer, a great old-time bluegrass song. I picked that and did that particular little break because I've got lessons on that and how to sort of build out that melody and double stop and little break on my website, MandoLessons.com. It's under the songs heading. There's a whole series on learning to play 9-pound hammer and working on it in a bunch of different keys, including the key of B, if I remember correctly. So go check that out. It could be a good kind of entry point into working on some different keys, including the key of B major. All right, Diane says, good to be back from Wilson, New York. And still have that cool coffee mug. Yeah, I love this thing. It's full of iced coffee today because it's hot out. It's probably going to get up in the 80s today, which might not be too bad compared to the rest of the country, but that's hot for a New Englander. Juiced says, and I don't, so apologies if I'm saying your name wrong. What are your opinions on the Eonzo family scales? I don't have much of an opinion because I've never really looked through them. I've only kind of heard about them, but I've heard good things, you know. And if you find that it helps your technique and your ability to kind of get to where you want to get on a musical level, by all means, go for it. And yeah, I don't know enough to really make much of a comment on them, but I've heard good things. Michael says, the lessons you've been doing recently with melodic variations and double stops for tunes are fantastic. Please do some more. Same with play-along jams. Great. Yep. So the last, if people haven't kept up, I've been putting out a couple new styles of lessons rather than just teaching like the basic melody of a lesson or of a tune. What I did one for, I think I did Whiskey Before Breakfast so far. But I've got more coming out where I do play along little jams. So we play through the tune 5 times. I play it, you play it, I play it, you play it, we both play it. And that way you can work on building a little solo and transferring between playing the melody and playing the chords. It's just like sort of being, well, it's 90% of like sitting across from somebody and playing some music with them. Except you can pause me, and if you mess up, you can rewind me, where it's harder to do that in real life. But so I've been doing that. I also, I think just this week, put out a full, I've always got a lot of requests to do kind of full transcriptions of like standard notation and tablature of the way that I play, you know, like when I was doing Waterbound there, rather than teaching people want to see kind of full tablature of when I really kind of get into it. And kind of that big, fuller sound. And I've just put out a lesson on Red-Haired Boy, where I have the whole transcription that really helps. I think a lot of people are looking for that sort of thing to really see what other strings I'm hitting and fingers I'm putting down, things like that. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Both those jam lessons and those full tablature lessons. I've got a couple of them coming up in the weeks to come and months to come. So keep your eyes and ears out. And thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon and with PayPal donations and Super Chat donations on these live things. You know, that sort of financial help really helps me, because I had to pay somebody to do those transcriptions. I'm not super fast at transcribing my own work. It's something I could work on, but there's also only so many hours in the day. So your financial support really helped me put those things together and get some tablature written out for you guys. Andrew says, do you know Joe Bandz? I know a tune by that name. There's a bunch of tunes by that name. I'm just going to look it up here real quick, and if I can... where's the one that I know? I know one off of an album by Andrew and Mary McNamara. How does this tune go? Oh yeah, here's the one that I know. So there's a bunch of tunes by that name. That's the one that I know. It's a great album if you're into Irish music. It's by Andrew and Mary McNamara. What is the name? The name of the album is Open Hearth. It's really kind of it's just concertina and button accordion. Really simply played tunes. Really lovely sound to it. Great tune. And I know that might not even be. They play some like less well-known tunes, so that's probably not the most well-known Joe Bandz. But that's the one that I know. Ooh, Calgaro says it's 36 degrees centigrade in Italy. That's hot. I think that's hotter than it is here. I'm not the best at the translation of Celsius to Fahrenheit, but I think that's hot. Yeah, Recovering Bassist says, I think mandolin is easier to transpose than some instruments because the same chord shapes go up the neck. Yeah, because it's straight fifths all the way across, G, D, A, E. You know, your chord shapes are very movable, and what works on 3 strings is going to work on the other 3 strings. All that sort of stuff really lends itself to an instrument that, once you get used to it, is very easy to transpose. And once you get the key of B, you've got the key of B flat and C sharp and D sharp, E flat, all that sort of stuff that you might not run into. Once you start playing without using open strings, you can really play in any key. All right, County Cork. Great to have you here. I was in County Cork last month, or not last month anymore because it's July now, but in May, and it was awesome. You live in a very beautiful place. Cool. Recovering Bassist says it'd be cool to teach a song here some week. Yeah, I'll think about that. It would be harder. It would be hard for people to find it later. You know, if it's, I could maybe like snip it out and make it its own lesson or something. But that's a good idea. I might think about maybe a good way to do that. SCPJ Martin says, from Lynchburg, Tennessee, thanks for joining us. When playing in first position, how important is it to keep the index finger at the first fret? In first position, I tend to keep my index finger at the second fret. Maybe that's what you meant. But I think what's really helpful is if you can get your hand into it, and this sort of goes through kind of my whole kind of physical technique of holding the instrument. That's the first lesson that I talk about in my beginner series. It's always good to rewatch that sort of thing if you're thinking about it's a long lesson, but it really kind of goes through all the whole body technique of getting your hand in the right position. And if you can get your whole body relaxed enough that you can get your pointer finger on the second fret and your pinky on the 7th fret of your G string, that means you can run through closed position scales and therefore move it and when I'm doing that, you'll notice my hand isn't shifting at all. It's just locked right in place. I'm not going. You know, my hand isn't moving, and that's because I'm centered in such a way that my hand can really just get rid of a lot of extraneous movement. And be centered around that second fret. So I think kind of working on that technique-wise is really helpful. It'll really streamline your technique and your playing and make everything sound a little better, at least as far as your left hand is concerned. Great question, though. Michael Martina, thank you so much for the Super Chat donation. I appreciate it, and thanks for joining us here on a Saturday morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Oh, from Beijing. You were from Beijing. So, good evening to you. It's probably fairly late at night in Beijing. Cool. Andrew says that's not the Joe Bandz he was thinking of, but now you want to learn that one. Yeah, check out. I think you'd like that album. That Andrew and Mary McNamara, Open Hearth. Check that out. I think you'd enjoy that album. Can we do some real-time jamming on an easy tune? Perhaps it may be the biggest mandolin jam ever. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a tune like... People know Old Joe Clark. That's kind of a pretty straight-ahead tune. If you got a mandolin, I'll just kind of do a little bit of what I do in that Whiskey Before Breakfast jam video. Play through the tune 5 times. I'll start out. I'll play the melody. You can play the chords behind me. Then I'll play the chords and you can play the melody. Back and forth, play it 5 times. The 5th time, let's play it together. And I won't be able to hear you, but you can hear me. So if you got a mandolin and you're all in tune, let's do a little bit of this. I'll play it not too fast. Yeah. Like maybe there. So here's Old Joe Clark, key of A. 1, 2, 3, 4. B part. You take the melody. part. Second B. Here we go, you take the chords. B. Go for it, take a little solo. B part. Second B. Let's both play the melody. B part. Going out. All right. Well, that was great. I hope some of you had a mandolin there and can pick along. That's the fun thing to do with music, is play along with other people. So if you don't feel like you do enough of that, find a buddy and do that as much as possible. That's the best way to get quicker, faster, is just find somebody to play music and learn alongside. You know, it doesn't matter if it's another mandolin player or guitar player or fiddle player. It doesn't matter what the other instrument is. It doesn't matter what instrument you're playing. Just, you know, get together with someone who's trying to play music too. It doesn't matter if you're at the same level as them. They could be a lot better than you. You could be a lot better than them. Just as long as everybody tries to be patient and have a good time, it's a lot of fun. Cool. Glad people enjoyed that. Maybe I'll do that more often. Well, there goes my coffee. Cool. Awesome. Got your banjolele going. That's great. Totally. Lewis says just play. That's the main thing. And the more fun you can have playing, the quicker the time will pass and the less it'll feel like work. And music's not about work, it's about having fun. Make sure everything's going well here. Looks like everything's in order. Maybe I'll play an Irish tune. Well, I've already played an Irish tune. I've done 2 old-time tunes and an Irish tune. Maybe I'll play something else. Cool. Recovering Bassist says, I actually kind of figured out the melody. That's my fear, not knowing the melody, and someone else says play. Yeah, that's definitely something. You know, I think there's something to be said for kind of figuring out some and working on some skills of like, you know, listening for the melody, trying to like maybe sing the melody, especially if it's a song that you don't know and somebody says like, yeah, take a solo. My main first thing is just like, okay, let's see if I can just play the melody of the song, and if I miss a couple notes, that's artistic interpretation. You know, so aim for the melody, and if you get off the melody a little bit, just try to get back on, and it'll sound like a solo. It'll be great. No one will even notice. Michael has a great question. He says, Does Cooley's reel lend itself to double stops and melodic variations? Any suggestions? It depends. It certainly can. I'll play it a little bit. I'll play it the way that I would normally play it, and then I'll add some double stops and variations. So in the Irish tradition, there's not a whole lot of double stops and melodic variation added. It's sort of traditional. If you go to a traditional Irish music session, you're going to see a lot of people and hear a lot of people just playing the melody. There might be a guitar player playing some chords, but mandolin, if there's a mandolin, they're probably playing the melody. You might have a bodhrán playing a rhythm. But for the most part, Irish music sessions and kind of social Irish music is about playing the tunes, and if there's dancers, dancing. And if you add double stops, kind of the way that I was adding them to Old Joe Clark and Waterbound and things like that, it can start to sound like an old time tune, which isn't a bad thing. It's certainly getting away from the tradition, but it can be a cool sound, and people certainly do kind of toy with melodies in that way. So I'll play it a couple times through. I'll play it once, just sort of standard. It's probably not exactly how I taught it, but if you're interested in learning this tune, it's called Cooley's Reel. It is on my website. And then I'll play it with some double stops and maybe a little bit of melodic variation. And you can sort of see how it's sort of, I think the nice thing about Irish music is it's distinctive from old-time music. And if you do too many old-timey things to it, it just sort of starts to sound kind of like a strange old-time tune, which again, isn't a bad thing, but it's getting away from the tradition. And learning a tradition can be a very useful and helpful thing if you want to play with other people in that tradition. So. So here it is with double stops. So it's a different sound. It's not really a traditional Irish sound. You can certainly try it out, but if you're playing in a social kind of traditional Irish session, that's not really the tradition. So I'd say, for the most part, stick to what you see other people doing. That said, if you're in a smaller group or a band setting and you want to toy with things in that way, by all means, try it out and see how you like it. I'll try to catch up with the chat here a little bit. Richard asked, do you play any O'Carolan tunes? I've got one O'Carolan tune on the site, Shebeg Shamor. I can't even remember how it goes off the top of my head. I don't know a ton of O'Carolan tunes. I know that one. I can follow a couple more, but that's not a huge part of my repertoire. I'd love to learn some more. I just haven't done it. Juice says it's hot everywhere in the world. How does everyone deal with sweaty hands? I personally just like wipe them on my pants or on my shirt, or keep a cloth nearby. Try to keep the heat off. You can, especially when it's really sweaty and hot and dusty or dirty or polleny. I find that I either need to do a better job of keeping my strings clean when I'm done, you know, wiping them down, which I'm not very good at doing, or else I just end up changing my strings more often because they die really quick and start sounding out of tune. I spent 10 days at Maine Fiddle Camp, and it was really polleny and humid and gross and wet, and I put on a set of strings right before I left, and pretty much they lasted me those 10 days, and I actually just changed them right before this this office hours, and it's so that my strings are new and probably a little out of tune at this point, but I should have changed them a long time ago because this mandolin just wasn't that fun to play because the strings were so grimy and gross. So you can either do like kind of keep on top of it by cleaning your strings a little bit, or just change them more often, which is what I end up doing because I haven't gotten in the habit of trying to clean my strings after I'm done playing. And by clean, I just mean like wipe them down with a dry rag. I'm not putting anything on the strings or anything like that, although I think some people do. Let's see, other questions here. Cool. Joan says, if people are enjoying that real-time jam, we should do it every week. Yeah, it'd be fun. Baron, can you suggest a tune for next week's Saturday's virtual mini jam? This way we can all work on it during the week. How about this? Because this one was unplanned, let's have Old Joe Clark be next week's tune in case people didn't know it. And then next week we can decide, maybe take some suggestions on what the next tune would be, but that'd be great. And especially if people can remind me, because I know I'm probably going to forget. But yeah, let's say Old Joe Clark next week. If you haven't learned it, it's a great tune. If you have learned it, try to get more comfortable with working up some double stops or some breaks or things like that. So when it comes time for you to play, you feel a little more comfortable wherever you're at. Even if you've been playing Old Joe Clark for 20 years, see if you can add something new to your playing of that tune over the next week, so that when we do it next weekend, I'm actually not going to be here next week, so you'll have 2 weeks to work on it. Or maybe whenever the next Saturday office hours is, we'll do Old Joe Clark. Please, please, please remind me, because I'm not going to be able to remember. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And I think it's good to like kind of have a little bit of homework of like, oh, here's something I could be working on for the next session here. Cool, we got some nice talk about banjolalis. Matthew says, are you going to be coming out to Arizona for Portal Irish Music Week in October? That sounds like a lot of fun, but I don't think I'm going to be there. Maybe some year, though. I've never heard of it and haven't been asked out, but it would be fun to go. AC Mullane says, double stops are fun in Irish music for solo playing, but they can throw the guitarist off if the chosen chords are different. That's definitely something you need to think about with double stops, especially in Irish music, because whoever's playing chords in Irish music often has a little bit of freedom and liberty to do some chord substitutions, adding in minor chords instead of major chords, things like that. And if you're filling up that sound with double stops, you're going to be implying certain chords yourself, and it sort of hedges the guitar player into needing to sort of follow you, which makes the guitar player's job a lot harder, and it's just going to create a messier sound. Whereas with old-time music, the chords are much more predictable and much more straight ahead, so you can kind of rely on those double stops a little bit to fill out the melody rather than get in the way. Hello from all of us at Reaching Out the Window for Kentucky, the band, coming to you from Portsmouth, Ohio. Well, thanks for joining in. That sounds... Don't entirely know what that is, but if it's some sort of band, that's great. Thanks for joining us. Andrew says, only 18 years until Orange Blossom Special is public domain. Can't wait for the lesson in 2036. Yeah, I better start practicing now. That's a wild tune. Oh, thank you, Recovering Bassist, for the Super Chat donation. Always appreciated. For tunes that cross over, double stops and bluegrass and straight melody for Irish sessions. Yeah. One example, the tune that always pops into my head is the Irish tune Boys of Blue Hill and the old time tune, oh, what is it called? I can't remember what the old time version of it is called. Twin Sisters? I think it's called Twin Sisters. It's the same tune, but one is... Irish hornpipe. So that's a nice kind of swung hornpipe, and the old time version, the Irish tune is called Boys of Blue Hill, and if you straighten it out and add some double stops and maybe a little bit less notey, you get Twin Sisters. So you'll find that tune, same tune, slightly different settings, and you get an old-time tune and an Irish tune. That tune is also on my website if you want to learn it. M.O. says, do you also play octave mandolin? I do. What I do is I play a lot of tenor guitar, which is a 4-string guitar. I don't tune it quite like a mandolin, so I tune it G, D, A, just like the bottom 3 strings. And then instead of an E, I have the high string down to a D, so just down a whole step. Maybe I'll pull out an octave or tenor guitar or octave mandolin in a little bit. Slightly different tuning. I play it fairly differently, but it's a fun instrument and tuned very similar. Covering Bassist says, can you play something jazzy? Sure, I'll try. I studied jazz in college and haven't really done much with it. Maybe I'll just kind of make something up here. there's some jazzy nonsense. A lot of the jazz stuff is copyrighted still, so I didn't want to play anything that would get picked up by the YouTube algorithms. But yeah, I would love to play more jazz. Just don't do it as much anymore. AC Mullane says, what's the deal with bluegrass tunes concerning double stops? Are the chords fixed? Yeah, much like old time, bluegrass chords are very straight ahead. They're often just 1, 4, and 5 chords, all major. You know, you could play bluegrass music all weekend for 24/7 and maybe never run into a minor chord. It's very major based. There are definitely bluegrass songs that have minor chords and more complex structures, but kind of the roots of bluegrass music is from old time music, which has is very major chord heavy, and very kind of simple chord. You'll just have 3 chords in a song, so and they're very repetitive, and there's no kind of chordal improvisation, so you can kind of adapt some double stops to that, and the chords maybe are moving less quickly than an Irish guitar player might accompany an Irish tune, and the melodies are moving slower, so you can take a tune and add a bunch of double stops. Whereas Irish tunes often are much more melodic driven. They have faster moving melodies, a lot more eighth notes. Etc. It's harder to throw in double stops when it's just a constant stream of eighth notes. And when you do, it ends up sounding like old-time music. Kind of loses some of that nice, more melodically driven Irish sound that's just hard to beat. So I tend to I try to keep my Irish tunes sounding like Irish tunes and my old-time tunes sounding like old-time tunes. But again, there is some crossover. Lewis says there seems to be more improv at bluegrass jams. Yeah, improvisation really isn't a part of traditional Irish music. Very melody and kind of unison-based music rather than improvisation. John asks, what string gauge do you prefer? Great question. Anytime I talk about gear, I always say this, so you're probably tired of me of hearing it, but anytime I talk about gear, no, I'm not paid by anybody to talk about the stuff I talk about, or don't get promotions or free stuff or paid to talk or anything like that. I guess they're technically a medium heavy gauge. It's D'Addario J75s or EJ75s, phosphor bronze. They're just a little bit heavier than J74s, which is the straight medium gauge. I use 74s on my old Gibson, which is strung a little lighter. I might put some heavier gauge strings on that just to see how it sounds, but need to do a little experimentation. A lot of older instruments weren't built to handle heavier gauge strings. So I'm not suggesting you put heavy gauge strings on an old antique instrument. Do so at your own risk. That's what I would be doing if I put heavier gauges on that. We'll see. But yeah, I like a little heavier. I play pretty hard and try to get a lot of the strings moving. So I think putting a heavier gauge just lets me kind of attack the instrument a little bit more. But it's a good way, with strings. Most sets of strings cost less than $10. It's a good way to experiment with your sound a little bit and see what happens. Greg says, we are working up Wayfaring Stranger with mandolin solos. What do you think? What do you have in a bag of tricks for that number? Thanks again for the great program. No problem. Thanks for watching. Wayfaring Stranger. What I would recommend is, especially with a nice, slow, kind of dark-sounding tune like Wayfaring Stranger. I would say, don't get, or you do ultimately do whatever your ear guides you to. My own personal preference would be to stick closer to the melody, really play the melody. The whole time I was doing that, the melody was right in there. I could have sung along to my whole solo. Adding little bits, that you do have the space that you can add some stuff to it. So anytime you have those big pauses, fill it in, fill in those longer spaces. You can add some nice double stops. That tune's got a beautiful chord progression, so adding in some double stops to really highlight those beautiful chords, especially when it changes to a major chord in the B part, super lovely. Try to jump in on that sort of thing. Chip says, how about a little bit of Ukpik or Amelias Waltz? Yeah, both are great tunes. Both are copyrighted, unfortunately. Ukpik was written by somebody that I can't remember. It's actually a Canadian fellow. Johnny something. I can't remember off the top of my head. And Amelias is written by Bob McQuillan. The late, great Bob McQuillan, New England legend in the contradance and folk music scene. Awesome piano player. But both are great tunes. Yellow Rose Farm says, is the tenor banjo as easy as a mandolin? I would say yes, with some it's going to depend on what you're used to. If you've been playing mandolin, you'll find tenor banjo is going to be more of a stretch because the scale length is longer. A lot of people, especially if you're coming from guitar, a lot of people think mandolin is hard because the scale length is so short compared to guitar. Mandolin being my first instrument, learning to play tenor banjo was it's a much longer scale length and took me some time to get used to that. That said, I think it always takes a little bit of time. The tuning is the same, assuming you're tuning at GDAE. There's a couple ways you can tune tenor banjos. But I think it takes a little, when I first got a tenor banjo, I was just playing it exactly like I do a mandolin and trying to get all that stuff to work. A lot of that sort of double stop stuff doesn't work as well. The tenor banjo has its own set of strengths and weaknesses. It's not quite as nice to do tremolo or big chords on. It doesn't have the sustain, but it's really great for triplets. So it comes with its own strengths and weaknesses. They're super fun. They're a lot louder. They're a little more traditional it's weird to tradition is a strange thing, but you're maybe more often likely to find them in an Irish session than a mandolin, but both are, I think, equally at home. I think there's sort of a little bit of popular preference for tenor banjos these days in Irish music sessions. I play one in a tenor. Yeah, I play tenor banjo in my local Irish session because it's a little more easy to hear. Often there's a dozen other people playing mandolin or playing fiddle and pipes and guitars and whistles. The mandolin can get swallowed up pretty quick in the mix, so having something a little louder can be helpful. Harder though to learn a tune on the fly. Excuse me. To learn a tune on the fly, because with the mandolin you can kind of hide behind the rest of the sound and play it quietly. It's hard to play a tenor banjo quietly. They're very loud and brash sounding instruments, which sound great if you know what you're doing and sound pretty bad if you are trying to figure things out on the fly loudly in a session. Andrew says, 2 live streams this week. Thanks for the lesson, Baron. No problem. Yeah, I did one on, what did I do? Was it Monday? I think I did a Monday live stream. I ran into some problems last week with my internet kind of cutting out. I think it's mostly my computer is like overheating, but I changed some things so I don't have as much stuff running. Just wanted to make sure it worked. So I did one on Monday. I might do some during the week, or if I can't make a Saturday, I'll do one another time. I'm never quite sure when it's going to work. It depends on the day. I think maybe Wednesday nights might become an option. I'll still do them on Saturday, every Saturday I can. But I might also try to do some Wednesday nights. Looks like I might have some regular free time then. And I love doing these, so... yeah. But yeah, probably not regularly on Monday nights. I would say Wednesdays might be a little more likely, but we'll see. No promises. That one's just going to depend on when I have free time and whether I can do Saturdays and things like that. AC Mullane says, the improvisation in Irish music seems to be in ornamentation rather than altering the melody, if that makes sense. I totally agree with you. True Tone lights on my old Gibsons from TA's Stingbat? Cool. I haven't tried those. I haven't even heard of those. But I'll look them up. I just got some pure, what are they, GHS pure nickel mediums that I'm going to try on my Gibson. Again, no sponsored content or anything like that. I just got them in the mail. Want to see what it looks like. Thank you, Chip, for the super chat donation, and thank you. I don't know if I said, but thank you, Andrew, for the donation. Always appreciated. Huh? He says, I don't know why I can't select a whole dollar amount. I don't either. I don't know how super chats work. It looks like for me, I can just like drag the slider, or maybe even just type in the, I don't know how to get out of here. I'm about to, oh, there we go. There's an X. I almost had to super chat myself. Seems like a good way to give YouTube a cut. But anyway, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to do the super chat thing. Oh, the verse is the solo in your version. Cool. Justin says, out of curiosity, is Foggy Mountain Breakdown public domain? I think that was written by Earl Scruggs. Might have been written by somebody else, but I'm pretty sure it's not public domain. I also think of it more as a banjo tune. I've never really figured out how to do it much justice on a mandolin. I'm sure some people have. Wow. AC says, I drilled 2 holes in the side of my mandolin to hear it better in the session, and I still struggle. Yeah, some people will do. Usually they're like built into the instrument at the time that it's built. I forget what they're called. Sound port or something like that. I think there's maybe different names for them, but sometimes it can be a little easier to hear yourself if you've got a sound hole up here. I'm not recommending that you do that, but if you're a wild experimenter, go for it. But yeah, I think mandolins are just a quiet, they can be loud too, but they get loud when you start doing double stops and chords and things like that. But yeah, that, tenor banjo is a loud instrument that's tuned the same, so I think they end up in a lot of Irish music sessions. Valerie says, do you know Good Morning to Your Nightcap? I know the title. I've maybe played along with it, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Yeah, Joan says streams at night would be rough for European followers. That's true. It's also not the best to do them at noon for people on the West Coast, because that becomes 8 a.m. or something like that, and I certainly don't like waking up super early on Saturdays. So I'll Saturdays always work for me when I'm in town, so I'll continue to do those, but I also might try some evening things just to see if other people can get on board. All right, I think I'm going to finish it up with one more tune here. I've got a request for Big Sciota, a great tune that we learned at Maine Fiddle Camp. I'll play through it. It's on my website if you want to learn it. Wednesday for Patreon office hours, please. Cool. Lewis is a Patreon supporter. Thank you, Lewis. And yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. I still haven't figured out what I'm going to do it this month, but Wednesday might be good. That is a good thought. And then maybe that's a once monthly thing. It's like this. It's a little smaller, so I can really like go more in depth with people's support with questions, and get a little more kind of one-on-one time. It's a smaller group of people. It doesn't swing by so quickly. Spend a little more time with everybody. That's a $5+ donation monthly thing through Patreon. You can check out patreon.com/MandoLessons if you're interested in that. But these weekly things will always be free. Cool, so I'll play a little bit of Big Sciota and send you on your way. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a great weekend. Cool. Alrighty, thank you all so much. Have a great weekend. See you. I won't be here next Saturday. I'm gonna go out to a old time weekend in Western Massachusetts. But see you after that. Probably two Saturdays from now, and maybe I'll do something during the week to keep these things rolling. Thanks again. Bye-bye, everybody.